this is sort of novel because I get to have my two girlfriends here, and the Tenino rebels. Woohoo! They are rock stars. So, but I'm going to go ahead and start. Well, as my two girlfriends already know about me, this documentary is very personal to me. Because my grandfather, my grandpa Ed, began molesting me when I was 7. And before you watch what Troy has created here, I want to acknowledge that statistically, in a room that has 4 women, at least 2 of them would have been sexually violated at some time in their life. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that this documentary brings up a lot of stuff that people didn't really think it was going to bring up. So if that happens, what I need to do when I'm watching it, in fact, is just remember to breathe, keep my feet on the floor, and I remind myself that there isn't anyone here tonight that is going to harm me, that this is among friends. Which is my lead-in really for talking about what the long-term effects of sexual abuse are. Have you ever really stopped and thought about why pedophiles and rapists are so dangerous? I think it is because sex crimes destroy a part of the victim's humanity in a way that no other, I mean, you can steal my car, it doesn't permanently damage my ability to love. Because they have that long-term effect, I think their crimes sometimes take away our understanding of who we are. Because in that moment, we are just the victim of a perpetrator doing something awful, and that's all we know about ourselves in that moment. And it takes a lifetime, really, to learn that we're more than that. I think that my grandfather's abuse took away my ability to dream or to believe that I could accomplish things because I really felt like I had no worth. And you know what? It crippled my hope that I could be loved by a God who cared about me. Because and it took me all the way through seminary and a lot of theology to understand suffering. But I grew up not believing that God cared at all about me. And if he created me, I didn't see a purpose for that. Perpetrators of sexual crimes leave wounds on our souls, and that damage is permanent. You know, we can go through a lot of healing things and time, but it does not ever completely erase what that selfish person did in that moment. And with support, we learn how to manage the pain, and yet the injury never really goes away. It is like a big mass of scar tissue. And I don't think that survivors really want to talk about the long-term effects of abuse on their lives. You know, I grew up and still am really afraid of intimacy. I've been married to John for 27 years. That's a whole nother thing. But will I be able to stay emotionally connected? Or will I just float away like I did when I was a little girl? Just go away because away was better. So I really have to fight to just even stay in a kiss with my husband so that I am really all there. I'm also sometimes too easy. It's too easy for me to trust. And then over here is somebody very trustworthy, and I don't recognize that in him, don't trust him at all. I don't make good judgments about trust. The picture on the table, my weight ballooned up to over 300 pounds when I was seeing Laura, and I now understand that that's what it took for me to feel safe. To go into the SCC and to talk to her and to work with some of the other offenders, I needed to be as unsexual as possible. And 300 pounds kind of did it for me. If you were behind me in the grocery store line today, I'd probably look sort of normal and ordinary. But if you were to look into my heart, you would still see the outline of my grandfather's abuse on my soul. Today, I can look back on the 10 years since I stopped seeing Laura and see how much God has done in terms of my healing. But I continue to fight addictions, sugar. There are Twinkies under my bed again. And you know, they come in chocolate now. So I just have to be careful about food, drugs, alcohol. I can become addicted to just about anything. Well, I began seeing Laura because I wanted to know why pedophiles do that. What are they thinking? Haven't you ever just wanted to sit down and say, what were you thinking in that moment? Anyone who's had kids has had those words come out of their mouth. What were you thinking? But this, of course, is a grander scale. When I first met Laura 20 years ago, she was an anomaly. We didn't think that women molested children. At the time, there were only 3 women in the United States identified as serial sexual predators. Women. Today, if you Google, there are over 22 pages of just women. But most of them committed their crimes in conjunction with a man, either trafficking or prostitution, or they hardly ever went solo. Laura went solo, not because she didn't want to share the experience. She went solo because her childhood sexual, physical, mental, and social abuse was so extreme that she thought orgasm equated to love. And so she still does not know how many victims she had because she considers so few of them victims. She was being a good babysitter. She was being a good friend. She was giving these children an experience of a lifetime in all the worst ways. In 1990, she was arrested and convicted of molesting and nearly killing an 18-month-old. And I met her. I met that woman. In fact, her father was the arresting police officer. I have never met someone who was that completely broken. And even though she doesn't have vivid recollections of what happened, the horror has stayed with her, and she is completely unfunctional. After completing her prison sentence, Laura went out to the SCC, and I met her just a few months after that. In fact, the chaplain out there contacted me when she was still at Purdy. And at the time of her commitment, they diagnosed Laura with a deviant arousal pattern that was very ingrained and has dominated much of her functioning. It just took me a long time to wrap my head about what that exactly meant. She was eventually, however, considered safe enough to release. She moved out to an apartment in Lakewood in 2019 after her psychologist said she had progressed in her treatment and no longer met the criteria for civil commitment. I thought civil commitment was based on your criminal past, but and she had a lot of conditions to meet, and she failed. She was rearrested when she accidentally accessed the internet, and oh yes, by the way, she had been stalking and having violent sexual fantasies about a 6-year-old girl in her neighborhood. Because she has a deviant arousal pattern. The judge returned her to treatment at the SCC. 9 months later, they released her again with no conditions. I'm sorry Rachel isn't here. I finally got the answer to what that was about, and we can talk about it at the end. But the psychologist said the reason she had no conditions, she still suffered from a pedophilic disorder, but he couldn't say with any kind of certainty that she was likely to abuse children again. Okay. How many of you can predict what you're going to do tomorrow? I can't. I might give the Twinkies to the neighbor, but I might get up in the middle of the night and eat them all. I can't promise you that because I have an addiction. And I believe that Laura does too. And the last time I was with her, I asked her about her fears going forward, and Laura said, Sylvia, I am afraid they will not be able to fix what's wrong with me. And if they can't, how will I live out there? How will I ever have a real home? When this documentary came along entitled The House, it's like, yes, this is Laura's story unfolding with a whole bunch of other people. So my hope is that tonight everyone will leave here not focused on government has failed us again, but with a clear understanding of the problems and the players, and that we have an ability to make a difference in our world. And I feel passionate about this. Yes, we need to keep the reporting guidelines. We need to continue to be able to look people up. Communities need to know who's moving in next door to them. I would like there to also be a registry for drug dealers and car thieves, because if they move next door to me, frankly, I'd like to know that too. Yeah. Second, how do you recognize a sex offender? You can't. You can't. It could be half this room right now. We wouldn't know. Because they're out at the mall, especially in the summer, the way the girls dress, at the grocery store, they're walking their dogs, they're watching your children and grandchildren play in the park, they're sitting next to you in church. The statistics are not any better for Christian pastors than they are general population. And the Grandpa Eds always show up for family reunions. Those were their favorites. That is a terrifying reality. When a child is abducted and molested, we as a civilized society, we rise up in anger. How could this happen? And yet we continue to support the industries that feed the obsession and the addiction until it grows to that point. And as long as we continue to buy the jeans and watch the movies, glue on our fake eyelashes. I never could get very good at that. And as long as we're going to eat Carl's Jr. hamburgers and wear the underwear in the sexy commercials, we're feeding it. We're contributing. And I think it is time for us to quit supporting the cultural things that lead to this very situation. I am so grateful that Troy has created this. It's captured my passion and renewed my zest for living and having a purpose. So